So Starmer and Macron on the phone yesterday, they've agreed on their joint line with President Trump. One, it's Putin who's the aggressor. Two, it's Putin who is the dictator. And that's the message that Macron's going to give face-to-face Starmer to Donald Trump in a couple of hours from now. What's going to happen?
How can you never know with Donald Trump, do you? That's the point. He is mercurial, erratic, call him what you will. Someone said to me...
A lot of harsher things
You
than
can
that.
say harsher things too. I said, is there some method in his madness? And I use the word madness advisedly, in that it's probably the way he's behaving. European countries really will now raise their defence spending. In a way that they haven't for years and years and years. We are now rushing, it seems, to get to 2.5%. Will it be talk now? It won't be 2030. It could be 2028. Was that his plan?
But it's quite clear Zelensky is not a dictator.
I agree with you.
And Putin is.
Yeah.
But Trump, the man-toddler, calls Zelensky the dictator and won't call Putin the dictator. And he's cut out Ukraine from the talks. He's trying to go direct with Russia to carve up another country, force them to get Ukraine to give up 20% of his territory. So method in these madness, I think the madness is the dominant factor here. Look, he's unhinged, he's deranged, he's a man-toddler who is either ignorant or lying most of the time.
OK, but Andrew's point is really pertinent, isn't it, to viewers this morning, which is he's got us to a position where Sir Keir Starmer's going to go over to the White House this week and say, we're going to spend more on defence. Now, the difference between 2.3%, which is what we currently spend, and 2.5% is an extra £5 to £6 billion in cash terms. Going to 3% would mean spending £20 billion more. 5%, £80 billion. Now, I'm sure people would go, excellent, looks like we're vulnerable, we've got to protect ourselves against Russian aggression. £80 billion would have to come from somewhere. What do you think Sir Keir Starmer has in mind to cut, even with the £5 billion extra going to 2.5%?
They either have to cut, they either have to raise borrowing even more, and borrowing levels are eye-watering, and we have to pay interest on the loans, so it's not a free deal, or he has to raise taxes again. Now, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rachel Reeves, will be saying, we can't even afford the £6 billion. But he's going to agree to that, and it could be by 2028 as opposed to 2030. So Donald Trump will say, I'm winning my war of words with Europe because finally they're taking responsibility for defending themselves.
But Keir Starmer, his target was 2.5% before. But he hadn't put a timetable on it. The Conservatives had put a timetable on it. They were going for 2.5%. They were going to go for that by 2030. Starmer hadn't put a timetable on it. It's whether he puts a timetable on it. Now the Lib Dems...
Surely, but Kevin, he's going to have to put a timetable on it because Trump will not accept an open-ended...
No, but...
He's going to want a date.
But Trump doesn't really deal in decimal points. I think you're going to increase defence spending from 2.3 to 2.5. You're going to go up 0.2% of GDP. Costs a lot of money.
£6 billion.
Well,
but my question to Andrew was, what's going to get cut? Andrew says, of course, possible tax rises, possible extra borrowing. But if you're a welfare claimment, you're thinking, is my welfare going to get cut to increase defence spending? If you're,
a waspy woman, you're talking about later, they're not going to get that money. No chance.
£10 billion.
No chance.
You're quite right. The targets of Labour and the Conservatives and Reform now benefits. Then you'll get on the right, the Conservatives and Reform always talk about international aid and clean energy spending. Of course, clean energy spending is going to make us safe from Putin pushing up oil and gas prices, which knackered our economy 3 years ago. And international development, well, a lot of it's spent here in Britain anyway on migrants and refugees, but the other stuff, it's to try and make the world more stable. If it's more unstable, then you'll have more people heading to Calais to get in a boat.
£6 billion has to come from somewhere.
I think the starting point, and I wouldn't be in this headlong rush to increase defence spending. The £57 billion we spend, I think, is the sixth highest cash amount in the world at the moment. 2.3 is way over the NATO 2% target. I think there are, is it 24 or 32 NATO members hit that target at 2%.
Trump's not going to buy that.
Trump isn't going to buy 0.2% increase in GDP. The Americans spend 5% because they also look across the Pacific in a way we don't. We're just in Europe mainly.
What will Prime Minister Keir Starmer do if Trump says, I'm sorry, 2.5% is not enough?
No,
I want 3%.
Yeah, but you know...
And when's the date?
Yeah, but the real push for Starmer isn't actually on defence spending when he goes to see Trump. It's about Ukraine. And about Ukraine and Zelensky being carved out, told to surrender, wave the white flag, give in to Putin. That's what that's his real push.
But have you ever known the politics of the personal to be so prevalent now? Because we know that Starmer does not roll with a punch. He hits back hard. And if he's being told to his face by Macron today and by our Prime Minister on Thursday that he's wrong about Putin and he's wrong about who invaded who, he's going to hit back.
Yeah, but what they'll do is Starmer won't say you were wrong to call Zelensky a dictator. He won't be that direct. He will use flattery, he will try and cajole him, he'll try and charm him, because you're dealing with somebody who is incredibly explosive and thin-skinned. Look, butterfly wings are thicker than the skin of Donald Trump. He takes offence so easily. It's rather demeaning. Macron and Starmer will both try the same, tickle him under the chin. Oh, you're a great winner. You've stirred things up. You're going to come out with a deal, but do it differently.
Trump regrets not doing more about this in his first term. He is sick to death of the fact that America picks up far too much disproportionate of NATO's bills. And it's time for Europe to come to pay its fair share.
Yeah, Andrew, what I think a lot of people feel is that Trump is pulling back.
Yeah.
And unless we have the backing of America, as the kind of world's policeman or world soldier, that puts us in a really vulnerable position when it comes to Russia.
It does.
Because after Ukraine, what next?
Baltic states? Poland?
Hang on. Right, you're quite right. America is pulling back. He's not going to reduce US defence spending, which is at ridiculous levels, because he wants to be the big lad with a big stick around the world.
It's at a ridiculous level.
But America's got the UK into some terrible trouble in Iraq, in Afghanistan in the past, so it's not always right.
Absolutely.
And the fact is, you're in NATO, so you don't have to face a threat like Russia on your own. So you don't have to match Russian defence spending. You just need collectively the spending up to deter...
And NATO is hugely strong, and Europe is hugely more wealthy than Russia.
Yes, Ukraine was not in NATO, which is why Ukraine was picked off.
America didn't get Britain into trouble in Afghanistan or Iraq. Your mate Blair did, who took us into the ridiculous war in the first place.
Oh, no, you're quite right.
It was a decision by the British government and Prime Minister, so you can't blame America for that.
Blair should have been like Harold Wilson in the 1960s over Vietnam and said, we're not getting involved in the invasions of Afghanistan or Iraq. We didn't, but it was the Americans who pushed it.
What is the worst that can happen this week? I asked the question because none of us could have predicted 10 days ago that we'd be talking like this. Nobody could have predicted that Trump was going to make those two statements, that it was Putin who was the victim here, and that it was Zelensky who was the dictator, and it was Ukraine who invaded Russia. I mean, it's preposterous. And yet it was said, and it dominated the discussion last week. So who knows what's going to happen this week? Something's going to happen, because these meetings are taking place. What's the worst that can happen as far as the UK is concerned?
That he pulls the plug completely on Ukraine and says, that's it, done.
Yep.
He wants mineral return. He wants access to mineral rights in return for the money he's already invested. But we have to remember that America was a great ally of us in the Second World War, but we were still paying off loans to America 50 years later. So he wants his pound of flesh. But what if he just said, I'm out of there?
You know what you hope is? You hope the scup of the talks, the direct talks between Trump and Putin, unless Zelensky is involved. Because at the moment it's Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, their foreign secretary, talking in Saudi Arabia with the Russians. You just hope it doesn't get to the point where Trump meets Putin without Zelensky and Ukraine involved, and he basically just said, I can stop this war because I'm going to hand Putin a victory. I mean, we could all do that. We could all just say, right, that's it, Ukraine, surrender. Exactly.
Right, let's bring it back, the conversation, to a very domestic issue. And this is something that the Mail on Sunday yesterday had as their front page. And this is that two plainclothes police officers turned up on the doorstep of a grandmother, 54-year-old Helen Jones, and asked to talk to her about Facebook posts that she made following reports of offensive messages that she shared in a Labour WhatsApp group. Now, this was a reaction that she had made to those very offensive WhatsApp messages where certain MPs had sort of wished the worst on constituents who had,
wanted one to die.
And somebody who just wanted to know that their bins were going to be collected.
This was the Shiver Me Timbers.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, Trigger Me Timbers WhatsApp group.
And a minister was sacked over it.
That's
Andrew
right.
Gwynn.
So a grandmother said in this closed WhatsApp group that one of the councillors linked should resign.
Yeah.
And mentioned a couple of times that this councillor should resign.
We'll just give the actual wordage. She said, let's hope he does the decent thing and resigns. Somehow, I don't think his ego will allow it. And then a bit later on, she posted another one saying, it's not looking too good for Councillor Sedgwick.
Yeah. So this
is that offensive?
This was the closed Facebook group talking about the WhatsApp group.
Yeah.
How did that deserve a visit from two Greater Manchester police officers?
Shocking. And J.D. Vance, the American Vice President, Sydney saying that big speech a few weeks ago, free speech is under threat in Britain. My God, there's a classic example. She was entirely entitled to post those comments. They weren't offensive, they weren't rude, they were quite constructive, because a lot of those councillors, in fact, were suspended from the Labour Party over those WhatsApp messages. And there's two coppers on her door. And when she said, oi, we couldn't get you lot round here when cars were being pinched, they said, we're not getting into all of that. Two police officers. This is a perfectly ordinary, law-abiding citizen.
It is.
She's a school administrator, and she's entitled to say it, and she does not need the old bullet on her door.
But if you read what the police said and what I think she agrees the police said, they weren't going around to say you can't do that, or saying we've had a complaint. And police say they have a legal duty. They have a legal duty if they get a complaint about you to go around. And she
what about when you get your car nicked?
If I keep on posting, will you take any action? And they said no.
No.
And they made it clear that there was no criminal offence at all.
But I think...
But she was nevertheless deeply discombobulated.
She was.
Two plainclothes detectives on her doorstep questioning her. And we've actually spoken to her. So can we just hear a few seconds of what she has to say?
I was a bit shell-shocked. I said, well, have I broken any law in what I've said? And he said, no, you haven't broken any law. So I said, well, if I carry on commenting in the same vein that I have been doing, will I be breaking the law? And he said, no. And I was a bit annoyed with him, and I told him that, perhaps he should go and fight proper crime. And I'd carry on as I see fit. Later, looking back through the Ring doorbell, zooming in, I could see he was a detective sergeant. And there was two of them. And I just thought, this isn't right.
She's right, isn't she?
Yeah,
you've got two plainclothes coppers spending God knows how much time, because it wasn't just the time they spent on a doorstep, they would have been the preparatory time, then the writing up of reports afterwards. That they could have been spending actually investigating crime.
And travelling to and from. Look,
all of that.
I mean, no, she was entitled to say what she wanted. I love it when she says, I'm annoyed. I'd be incandescent. Now, Greater Manchester Police have got this wrong. But if you do have to inform people when a complaint is being made, is there another way of doing it?
Well, but also, Kevin, the comparison is how many people in that area, if they complained about a burglary or vandalism of their car, did they get two detectives turning up on their doorstep to investigate that?
And that was raised in that Mail on Sunday report. There'd been a spate of car thefts in that area. Did anybody see a police officer? No.
Well, if she...
So what's the priority then? To wrap over the knuckles a perfectly law-abiding, respectable woman who was entitled to say, I wonder if this council's going to be sacked.
If she gets a visit, what about Andrew Gwynn, the sacked health minister, the suspended Labour MP in Burnley, and the 11 councillors are also suspended for what they wrote? Have they had visits? But no, look, if Greater Manchester Police...
It feels like bullying.
If they have a legal duty to inform you if there's a complaint against you. Now, personally, I don't think they should have a duty. If somebody's come up with a complaint that's clearly baloney and they can't produce any evidence...
We're going to debate this later.
It should just be dismissed.
Exactly. I mean, there are lots of spurious complaints made to the police, and they don't investigate them, and they don't go to the person who's been complained about, because it is obvious nonsense. So why didn't they ignore this?
It's bullying.
It's obviously
Well, it's posting. It's where is the evidence? Now, if anybody goes in and says somebody's been shouting offensive abuse to me over my garden fence or in the street, I could see that would have to be investigated.
Yeah.
But if it's social media postings,
and
you
you've
should
got the
have to
evidence of
produce
what,
the social
and you've got the
media
evidence of
postings.
what's been complained
They
about,
were-
and it's
Yes.
clearly something
I'm
which is
sorry,
not
I'm sorry, they were bullying that lady.
Yeah.
Well,
bullied
Greater
her.
Manchester Police have responded. We spoke to the woman for 6 minutes to advise her
God's sake.
she was the subject of a complaint of harassment and to answer any questions she may have. No further action is necessary as no crime has been committed. But we are under a duty to inform her she is the subject of a complaint. Now, they point out the genuine threats that have been made to local councillors recently have meant it is more necessary to ensure all reports are looked at. And they also say, on this day, officers made 203 arrests for crimes like assault, burglary and rape. Tackling these priorities is why the complaint was dealt with 2 days after it was reported.
Look, it wasn't bullying. Their tone was not. It was not bullying.
I think it was
they got
bullying.
it wrong. They got it wrong.
She felt bullied.
and she sounds perfectly reasonable. And if there are if people are making death threats, abusive threats against councillors,
she wasn't.
Investigate them, but not perfectly legitimate free speech and democratic.
She was
From what I can see, she was asking for resignations, and I'm not sure asking for a resignation is harassment.
No, quite.
No.
So,
It's called free speech and fair comment.
And possibly a legitimate
democracy
question.
and
All right, speaking of free speech and fair comment.
Free peaches.
Free
peaches.
Free
For
peaches.
all. Fruit for everyone. I just love the story from America, back to America, and I'd just love to know what British civil servants would react like if they had a memo like this. Elon Musk has sent a round robin to basically the civil servants of America saying, justify your job, tell me what you've done over the last working week, and if you don't, by the way, answer this email, I'll take it as your resignation note, OK? I mean, this is obviously all part of the cuts in numbers there. How would a British civil servant react to getting something like that, do you think?
Well, I hope they go straight to their trade union.
Right.
That's what I would hope. Look, a lot of departmental heads have told them to just ignore it because Musk isn't a full...
Yeah, the head of the FBI said...
Yeah, exactly, just because... what a waste of people's time. Well, if you've got people having to sit there for hours justifying their jobs, and who's going to read it and collate it?
Some people might cheer it to the end.
Yes.
What do you think?
Well, I think the public sector in this country has grown considerably. That Rachel Reeves is going to have to find £6 billion to pay for extra defence spending. That may be the sort of question where he may not put quite so boldly, but that is something they're going to be looking at in the public sector.
Isn't it dreadful, all those doctors and nurses treating us when you talk about the public sector, all those teachers and teaching assistants educating our kids, all those people emptying our bins, filling in the potholes, making sure it works, and you've just wanted higher defence spending. Well, you know that's public sector spending.
All those diversity administrators in the NHS, that cost her 40 million a year.
These employees, they've got to come up with 5 bullet points explaining their accomplishments from the past week. And the deadline is midnight tonight. Even though they've been told by other people in the government to ignore it, Elon Musk is a powerful man.
He is.
And he said, if I don't hear from you by midnight tonight, that will be you handing in your resignation. It's quite a dilemma, isn't it, for anyone receiving that email?
Yeah, so no Homeland Security, no air traffic control, no policing. That'll be great. Yeah, go on, Musk, go for it, mate. Go on, you can absolutely collapse America if you like.
That would be a bad week to do it.
Yes.
Maybe notes might be sent to the BBC documentaries department, asking them to justify their position, because, as we know, there's this developing argument now that a documentary which was broadcast a few days ago on the BBC called Gaza, How to Survive a War Zone. And it turns out that the child narrator of this piece, which was filmed in Gaza, was the son of a man called Ayman al-Azuri, who was the deputy minister of Hamas's agriculture industry, and there were other strong family connections with Hamas. Now, the BBC didn't make that known when they broadcast the documentary. They've since apologised. They pulled it, and they're reviewing it now. Kemi Badenoch, the Tory leader, has demanded to know if licence fee payers' money was given to this
Well, it's a legitimate question, which would be terrible. How did they not do proper due diligence? When you put somebody in front of a camera, and particularly in an area so sensitive, what's happening in the Middle East, not to have... It had been pretty obvious that his father was a senior politician for Hamas. Did they know, the people who made it? And if so, it's reprehensible.
You can't really get your head around the BBC.
The BBC struggle to call them the Hamas terrorists anyway.
As the Culture Secretary Lisa Nandy said, they take more care than many other organisations. They get it in. You know, one side will say they're too pro-Israeli, the other side will say they're too pro-Palestinian. They try and tread a path down the middle.
This is terrible.
It's very hot. Of course it is.
It's terrible.
Well, look, it's either sloppy
it's a
journalism
terrible mistake.
or it is bias. It's one of the two, isn't it? It's sloppy journalism or it's bias.
And there's a horrible suspicion that some people must have known.
Well, somebody, you've got to. But can you imagine, right, after the pogrom on 7th of October, year before last, many people had terrible stories of what happened at the music festival in kibbutz where people were killed. And if there's a film made on the Israeli side, and it happened to be the child of a minister in the government, look, there's enough people in Israel who are there, and you can speak, who aren't politically engaged. And it's the same in Gaza. The tragedy in Gaza has been the killing of so many innocent Palestinians who aren't
for the BBC.
Hamas. Why can't you find somebody from those families instead of going to the government? It's beyond belief.
A child as well, really.
Well, no. That's legitimate because you're looking at a war through the eyes of a child.
And what did Daddy tell him to say?
But it's the child you use. You do not use one that is linked to the regime that committed the pogrom.
It reeks of exploitation, doesn't it?
It does.
Well, it's just
it leads to accusations of propaganda.
Well, it does.
That's the trouble.
And remember who pays for the BBC?
It's a terrible mistake.
We all do.
Yeah, and that's why Kemi Badenoch said, did any of the money involved in this go to Hamas?
Yeah.
Well, you can imagine a fee might have been paid to that child, and then it just gets worse and worse for the BBC.